Good afternoon, everyone. I am starting up my live stream for a reading from my ongoing climate fantasy series, Helkey, and I am going to be reading for you guys a recent chapter, Gibbons Crane Ghost Jet Blue. And if you guys are watching on Twitch or Facebook or YouTube and you want to comment, I am going to be monitoring the comments as I'm doing the reading, but I am not going to reply to any of the comments until I'm done. I know this is not typically how live streaming works, although I guess some people do presentations as live streams. Some people just do their thing and then respond as they go. Although I guess, music is kind of a performance as well. So you can live stream and you're singing and then talk after you sing. So just consider this kind of like that. I'm going to be reading a chapter. This one's maybe about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes long. It's not a really long chapter from Helkey. For those of you who are just tuning in to these Helkey readings for the first time, Helkey is my present fantasy writing project. It is loosely connected to some novels that I've already published, the Luthiel's Song series. And this project is kind of a book as blog project. I wanted to be able to try and leverage all the various features for communication and art that are available on the web, as opposed to putting this project into book form and going out and promoting it as just a book. Now, as we continue, likely to have both hard copy and electronic copy versions of Helkey when we are done. I don't know, maybe the first book, maybe the second. It just depends on how much time it takes to build up a decently sizable audience. I mean, I could certainly take this book on tour, but I'd rather spend my time writing. Those of you who are creators can understand the tension between outreach and going out and connecting with your audience and the need to put your nose to the grindstone and create content. And there's always been a bit of a tension with that, but with the internet and with all the tools that are available for creators now, often you can merge the two, which is one of the things that I'm learning to do now. My talent when it comes to artwork and visual presentation is not as I'm not as confident in that. I don't have all that much in the way of artistic talent when it comes to drawing, and right now we don't have a budget for hiring an artist, although we would love to. So if you are an artist and you are an emerging artist, coming out of college or involved in a college program, or you enjoy posting your art on DeviantArt, and you think that this project is something that you might want to work on, go ahead and contact me, because I am looking for artists, and we will have some budget for art related to Helkey, probably in the near future, hopefully. But in any case, I know I've chatted a little bit about Helkey, and the ongoing project that is Helkey, which I'm very excited about. I've really enjoyed writing it. And so without further ado, actually, hold on. Some further ado, I'm going to go ahead and tell you where you can read Helkey if you wish. So it is over at Scribbler's Fantastical Workshop, which is what we're looking at now, the screen page. And It is one of a couple of projects that I'm working on. But if you go to Scribbler's Fantastical Workshop and you want to read or listen to and or watch and enjoy the video blogs and live streams that I've posted for Helkey, you can go to the Helkey table of contents and go to chapter 1, the memory draught, which is the first chapter, and read through or listen to the chapters at your leisure. Because I have, well, at this point, created up to 17 video blogs and or live streams for the chapters that have published. Now, if you wish to continue reading for the ones that I don't have video or audio content for, chapters 18 through 24 are now available live. And we are looking at publishing chapter 25 in the next 2 to 3 days. So I'm not certain if chapter is actually the right term. It's more kind of an episodic fashion, although I am roughly organizing these chapters or episodes into books. And the present book will complete once we get to around chapter 30. Oftentimes, as I get closer to the end of a creative work, more things need to happen before the completion. So it might end up being, I don't know, as much as 35 chapters, possibly, maybe, I don't know. But presently, we're tracking for 30 chapters before this one is complete. And then the next Helkey project or series project will be roughly organized into the next book, which is the Madness of Mechanum, in which Myra Helkey ends up getting more deeply embroiled. Myra being the main character, gets more deeply embroiled into the political machinations of the diabolical world that is hell, and in which Beatrice, Mori, Sadie, and Ivan spend some time in the world of heaven. Possibly, I don't know. Maybe Ivan won't make it to heaven. That's possibly. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. A little spoiler alert. But Ivan, being Asmodeus's prophet on Earth, which Sadie is trying to save, his future, his fate is certainly, shall we say, up in the air. It's up for grabs between heaven and hell. But on the present arc, Sadie, Beatrice, and Mori are trying to bring Ivan to heaven to wipe away this hold that the devils have on Ivan, being Asmodeus's chosen. So a bit of serious conflict and drama surrounding that character. And so that will continue in the next series for Helkey and or book, if I ever publish it in hard copy, The Madness of Mechanum. And we also have provisional titles for more works or more series and or books in the Helkey series, the Killer Devils, Slaver Prison, and the final one in this first group of series is Fortress Invincible and the Lake of Fire. So yeah, so a little bit of overview for the Helkey series for you there. I know I've probably just confused everyone a little bit here. I don't know. Just a little overview, which is fun. Now we're going to be, oh, I see somebody is watching. Hello. I don't know who may be watching on Facebook or YouTube, but welcome to whoever is viewing me now. And I am going to go ahead and read Helkey 17, Gibbons Crane, Ghosts Jet Blue. Gibbons Crane and his nightmare roll like a fossil fueled thunderstorm over I-35, their oily procession provoking the blares of honking horns, stiff middle fingers, and shouts of road rage anguish. Demons gather to slurp up the grief, to fan it further. Not far behind, a man on a Harley fingers his Glock and thinks about what he'd like to do to some hombres downtown, mass murder glinting in his eyes. Big black nightmare as Hummer spews out a cloud that covers all four lanes, Confederate flag snapping its naked, hubris-fueled racism. Combustion engines, pistons pumping out their angry staccato. It's a short, if raucous, 4 minutes to Austin Bergstrom International Airport. Gibbons grins all the way. He'd forgot how fun it was to punk humans, to get them all riled. The angry looks, loud profanity, and posturing is simply delicious. He sends an electric whip crack to his captive wisps. Their anguished cries of pain add to his sadistic pleasure. Coming too soon to Presidential Boulevard's departure lanes, Gibbons gives the Nightmare's Hummer one last cold rolling gun of the engine, then cuts off a pair of newlyweds to get to the curb. Soot rains down on the now miserable couple. Gibbons pops the door, uncoils from the seat, and springs onto the sidewalk. It's early afternoon, and the airport bustles moderately in anticipation of the late afternoon rush. Giving no care to bystanders, Gibbons cracks his electric whip again, summoning the orange transformative glow of his warbs. Nightmare melts back into a towering shadow as the Hummer simply vanishes. Onlookers gasp. But a fearful denial soon sets in as their fragile minds rationalize various explanations. The bad dreams are already forming. Many will spend the night tossing in mindless terror as the nightmare grips them. Gibbons and his nightmare shadow walk through the entrance. He pulls out a pack of Marlboro Reds, the kind that cut your lungs with fiberglass when you smoke them. He lights up, glaring at a security guard approaching him. Orange light crackles in his eyes. The guard freezes in fear. Gibbons continues smoking, even as masked passers-by stare. Puffing like a chimney, he saunters up to the quick line. That's the 5 people waiting there. Walks through the metal detector. There is a loud blare. 3 TSA agents spring up, as if waking from a stupor. Gibbons fixes them with his brimstone stare. "You boys are doing bang-up work here, keeping the natives from getting too restless," he says, taking a long pull on the cig and causing the cherry to glow bright red. "I think it's time for a well-earned lunch break." Cracks his electric whip. His captive wisps cry out in pain. A devil magic spark leaps from the cigarette's cherry and shoots through each TSA agent. They freeze in terror as they briefly glimpse various horrors of destruction swirling in Gibbons' soul-eating gaze. Gibbons flicks his cherry on the stupefied supervisor and lazily walks on by. The concourse is only moderately trafficked. It's disappointing. Gibbons has to work to get in people's way, to force them to avoid him. He zigzags against the flow of humanity, occasionally stepping on the odd toe or putting the occasional wimp on his ass. Each interaction spreading grief, rage, terror. He's doing yeoman's work here for his liege. But he can't wait. Berlin is 13 hours away by normal flight. Not like this flight is going to be anything like normal. It'll still take hours, and his quarry won't wait. He plops down in a chair near his terminal. A silver-blue Boeing 777-300ER is parked just outside his window. Its graceful body swoops and tapers back in a tall, jet-blue fintail. This fossil-fueled beast will suit his purpose just fine. He draws another drag from his cigarette, smiling as nearby passers-by move away from him, complain to the steward at the gate, or haul away squalling brat kids. The steward approaches. Gibbons simply blows smoke in his face. The diabolical taint carried in that miasma puts the loser in a pathetic stupor. He stumbles off, briefly catches a glimpse of the nightmare, then sits down in fear paralysis. Gibbons barely notices as he swirls the smoke with his index finger. The curling threads form a scene of Ivan the Wolf howling atop Furzabank, Beatrice and Mori slaying pride eaters, then briefly exorcising the demon from Ivan. The scene, dancing and flickering with hellfire, draws a smirk from Gibbons. He can plainly see the deep wound made by the pride eater's claws in both Ivan's body and Wisp. A complete channel for demonic possession. This will make his hunt easier. It will also please his lord. Ivan is already teetering at the edge of full transformation. What a pal. The flight is starting to board. Gibbons doesn't have a ticket. No matter, he cuts the line, ignores the orderly boarding process, and struts down the jet bridge. A couple puffs of devil's smoke confounds any protest from stewardess or pilot. It's all just too easy. Gibbons enters the filling plane and plops down in first class. The boarding will take a little while. He pulls his black hat down over his face and treats himself to a little shut-eye. Delicious nightmare gathers through the link in his mind as he focuses on that beast of perpetual terror. It takes up most of the first-class cabin, its pall of fear dragging down each newly seated passenger. This makes Gibbons' smile widen as he gathers his wisp energy, meditating on a new nightmare form. This one, a possession. Excusez-moi, tall, dark, and terrifying, but are you in my seat? The exclamation comes just as Gibbons finishes readying the path for his new devil's magic. He tips back his hat. The newcomer is a pink-haired they with silver-painted long fingernails. Their androgynous face sports all the latest eye makeup. Gibbons attempts to blow smoke in the influencer's face, but discovers his cig has burned out. He pulls it out of his mouth, then flicks it on the interloper. Disgust! They shout as they swat the butt away. Extending a finger, they tap Gibbons on the chest. Learn to be less rude. How in God's not so green any longer earth did you ever get that cig on the plane, dear? Not that I wouldn't mind one myself, but get out of my frigging seat. Oh. Gibbons has produced another Marlboro, lighting it with fire from the tip of his finger. Neat trick, dearie. What are you, some kind of black magic man? Gibbons blows smoke in their face. They stumble off in a stupor, careening in disorientation through the cabin. Ah, I broke my nail. Gibbons' smoke has now filled much of first class. This has a momentary pacifying effect on those sitting nearby. Some are confused by Gibbons' smoke, others brood over it. A few are intrigued, but the dark animalistic impulses born upon Gibbons' miasma begin to take hold. Terror, rage, and various other dark passions bloom. The result is a general hubbub as couples begin fighting, children shriek, and individuals either cower or engage in some form of mischief. Through it all, the poor stewards and stewardesses have their hands full. No one notices the smoking devil spinning his black magic out of enslaved souls in torment, sitting among them. The aircraft staff manages to get the unruly passengers under some semblance of control. The plane door closes, the cabin pressurizes. Gibbons feels a few bumps as the aircraft begins to taxi out onto the runway. They come to the markings showing the takeoff pad, stripes of black and white stained brown by jet exhaust. The plane spins, pointing its nose toward the long strip of concrete and readies itself to launch. Engines begin to rev. Their banshee wail fills the cabin. With a crooked smile, Gibbons flicks his wrist. The cries of wisps rise up to accompany the engine wail as diabolical magic courses out of Gibbons' orbs, up his arm, along the tip of his cigarette. It swirls there for a moment, then atomizes the cherry, bursting out in a split flash of orange lightning that envelops the aircraft. With a spectral cry, Gibbons' nightmare is taken in by the hell lightning. Its shadow expands to cover the body, wings, and engine of the aircraft. Silver metal darkens. Wings become serrated like those of a bat. A shark-tooth mouth design sprouts in the plane's nose. Fins like those of a drake unfurl along its spine. The blue corporate emblem twists and flickers. It takes on various shapes, flicking between hammer and sickle and swastika before settling on the swastika. The engines enlarge. Their intake edges become serrated teeth. Gibbons' nightmare now possesses the aircraft in all its terrible, hellish fury. Its engine revs louder. The banshee wail rises to a scream. Passengers add their own cries, white-faced, as giant gouts of flame shoot out from the jet engines, extend 300 feet behind, and ignite the grass. A man flails in his seat, gripped by terror. His heartbeat gives way to full coronary arrest. The stewards are too shocked to notice, taken in by the spectacle of horror that is their kaiju aircraft. Gibbons laughs out loud, glorying in the chaos and terror. In the cockpit, there is shouting as the throttle rams forward on its own, directed by a ghostly nightmare hand. The plane rockets forward, borne on a plume of smoke and fire. It howls down the runway. Engines open wide to spew their hellfire and black exhaust. The wings seem to flap as the beast's aircraft blasts into the sky. The shrieks of passengers grow louder. A poor child shits himself in terror. The stench and screams add to Gibbons' maniacal joy. The plane climbs more like a rocket than an aircraft, rising into the sky like some strange reverse meteor. It blows holes through clouds. Oil-thick spume falls from the smoke clouds behind it, raining pollution on the land below. It rises, rises. The sky darkens. Clouds below seem tiny. The cabin pops and hisses with pressurization. A businessman points, exclaiming at the tiny dots of regular jet traffic passing far, far below. Gibbons' new nightmare machine skirts the edge of space, moving far faster than a normal jet. They'll arrive at Berlin-Brandenburg in just 7 hours, about half the regular flight time. Gibbons puffs his cig as he takes in the shock-to-silence passenger cabin, hears the pleas for assistance over the radio being transmitted by pilot and co-pilot through the closed cockpit door. A passenger shakily makes his way to the lavatory. He opens the door, enters, and unzips. He sits down, but his momentary relief turns to terror as the nightmare grips him with jaws that emerge from the toilet. He is clenched in the spectral maw, shrieking as he is shaken back and forth in his seat. Blood spouts from his nose, flowing down the front of his dress suit. A vessel inside his brain is ruptured from the nightmare's assault on body and spirit. His cries grow slowly weaker as he hemorrhages. A stewardess approaches the lavatory, ventures a glance inside, recoils in fright at the scene of the man gripped by spectral jaws. She musters some courage, grabs the man's hand, pulls him. The jaws grip him tight as they struggle. At last they relent, and she falls to the ground with the dying man atop her. "Help!" she yells to a second trembling stewardess. After a moment, some passengers aid her in carrying the nightmare-struck victim back to his chair. From that moment on, no one dares to get up to go to the lavatory. A number relieve themselves in their seats. Gibbons continues to merrily puff away on his cig. There will be more sacrifices to the nightmare-possessed aircraft as they continue their swift passage. It is fitting. This dark new reality seems to have dawned on the passengers who stare out their windows in terror, hide beneath coats and blankets, or even crouch on the floor. Ghostly forms now run up and down the length of the passenger cabin, taking the shape of grasping tendrils, toothy maws, or wicked eyes. They are literally riding in the belly of the beast. Gibbons lets out a satisfied puff of pollution. He's done his work for now. His nightmare will handle the passage. Lowering his hat over his head, he settles in for a well-earned nap. His nap is not a human sleep. It is a fugue shared with his nightmare as they feast together on the terror of the passengers, as they glory in each new life taken in terror for the sake of hell. 6 hours into the flight and 13 victims later, Gibbons wakes from his feasting fugue. He leans over his seat, reaches down to a cowering passenger. With a rattlesnake strike of his arm, he wrests her cell phone from a clenched grip. She whimpers but offers no resistance. He lifts his new prize, a gleaming iPhone, taps it, and infects it with one of his wisps. This one is a demon, a taken pride eater, one of a handful he keeps for a special occasion. The pride eater rifles through the phone as Gibbons whips it with his electric lash, readying for his call. A pentagram appears on the iPhone screen. Orange devil's script blossoms in a glowing circle around it. Ivan Volkov, prophet of Asmodeus, Gibbons speaks into the pentagram. The screen vibrates as the pride eater seeks Volkov both on Earth and through the cellular network. Its demonic form surfing through each connection, even as its senses locate Ivan sitting at the Mio bar in Berlin. The pride eater shrieks its ecstatic joy hunger as it causes the bartender's phone to ring. "Hello, this is Mio bar. How may I help you?" The bartender's voice crackles on the line in German. "Yes, I'm looking for someone at the bar. Name's Ivan. Might I speak with him?" "Da, he's here. Just a minute." Gibbons cracks his devil's grin. There's a rustling as the phone changes hands. "Da, who is it?" Ivan's voice crackles through the connection. "It is your good friend, Mr. G, representative for Mr. A. Don't know you." "You see, there's where you're mistaken, old Ivan. We've known each other for quite a long time, and our recent meetings at the top of Furzebank Tower have yielded great reward. We gave you the gift of power earlier tonight. Power to destroy the wretched folk who afflict you. More is on offer right now. All you need do is say yes, I accept. It'll be yours." Silence and crackling sounds over the connection. An image of the bar scene carried to Gibbons by the pride eater's sight flicks over the iPhone screen. "Come on, Ivan, what'll it be? You want to let that Negro continue to disrespect you? Or are you going to show him who's boss?" There's silence for just a moment longer. Then Ivan says, "Da. Accept." Gibbons' grin widens in triumph. "Very well. Now here comes the stuff. Gibbons taps the phone and the Pride Eater flows down the line and into Ivan. Gibbons watches the screen with satisfaction as the Russian begins to transform. As he starts to attack Jonas Harrington, then Beatrice and Mori are there, weaving their protections around Ivan, knocking the Pride Eater contact out of him. The Pride Eater shrieks with anguish as it flees back to Gibbons' orb. The pentagon and diabolical writing fade from the phone. Fucking jackholes, Gibbons curses as he tosses the iPhone to the ground. Its faceplate shatters. The girl in the next row whimpers but doesn't dare reach out to retrieve her phone. Gibbons' moment of rage soon fades. He has now scented them a second time, his quarry. And once he catches scent of a quarry, there is never hope of escape. His nightmare aircraft shrieks through the starlit sky as it plummets down its fiery tail toward Berlin. Airport abustle with siren wails as emergency crews gather. The pilots have at last sent their Mayday signal ahead. A confused response team sprays runways with foam. Air traffic controllers track the aircraft swooping down on Brandenburg Airport like some dragon out of fiction. News media is all abuzz with talk of hijackers and terrorists. The sky looks like a meteor fall. Stewards and stewardesses are doing their best to prepare the passengers for impact. The plane is moving too fast. The landing gear won't lower. Fire from the nightmare envelops the craft as runway lights grow into focus before them. One of the pilots goes into shock and begins to hyperventilate. He passes out. The other tries to wrestle the yoke, which, possessed by the nightmare, jerks back and forth, ultimately punching him, cracking his skull open. The plane slams down onto the runway with both pilots incapacitated. It careens in a shower of sparks. Steel and titanium rend open. The jet twists. A wing flies off. Passengers are hurled in all directions, still attached to seats or ripped from them. The plane shrieks to a halt, jet fuel exploding into fire. In the midst of the inferno, untouched by flame, Gibbons stands from his rent chair. He casually kicks away a large piece of debris that obstructs his passage. It must weigh about 1,000 pounds. It flies off like a child's toy. He walks from the wreckage and onto the tarmac. Booted feet splash in the pools of burning jet fuel. He does a little murder joy skip out onto the grass, waltzes to the fence. Lifting his hand, he calls his nightmare back to him. The plane slumps and shakes, withering back into its original shape, if now broken and burning. Fire engines and ambulances surround it, sirens blaring. Streams of flame retardant bathe the burning form. Rescue personnel comb the area for survivors. Asmodeus, Lord, accept this sacrifice of mortals. Call forth thy terror hounds to take what victims you will, for the glory of hell. Gibbons incants. At this last phrase, the hounds emerge, ripping wisps from the victims scattered through the burning wreckage and out across the runway. Gibbons then grabs the fence, peeling back a section of links. He steps through the gap and onto the road. With a whip flick of his wrist, his nightmare again transforms into a gigantic black Hummer. He mounts and takes off toward Berlin, his eyes set to his quarry. And that concludes my reading of Helkey 17, Gibbons Crane, Ghost Jet Blue. Gibbons, notably a very nasty customer. And definitely one of the chief villains in this story. I hope you did enjoy my reading. If you wish to hear or read more, Check me out on Scribbler's Fantastical Workshop or on my YouTube feed, which is Robert Finet, which is my name. And I actually will be seeing you very soon as we shift gears and get ready to do some fantasy map artwork for a Dungeons and Dragons game that I will be running tomorrow. So thank you all for joining me, and I will be talking